punishment involves logical consequences. According to the book Rules in School, which is what Ms. Hargo was speaking to you about, logical consequences help children see the connection between their behavior and the effects that it has on themselves and on others. We want them to be able to think through their choices, understand that it is a choice that they have, but to think through it. They help children understand we are all responsible for the consequences of our actions. And the book lists several characteristics of logical consequences for a student who misbehaves. One of the things in my classroom that I try to help children understand is it's not necessarily always about, oh no, if I do this, I might get in trouble. You know, that's not what I want to be on the forefront of their minds. I want them to understand, okay, you do have a choice. You have a choice to follow my instructions, to listen, to obey. You have a choice not to. And if you don't, then you're also choosing the consequence that goes with that. That's that logical mindset. So there are three components of this that the book talks about. The first is relevant consequences. Relevant consequences directly related to the child's action. For example, students that are working in a group, we put them in group settings and they're working in a group, and instead of working on that assignment, they're talking about what they're going to do on the weekend. Having a great conversation, but it's not what it's supposed to be as far as the assignment. And so a logical consequence would be possibly for them to not be able to work as a group anymore. They're with friends, most likely, and so they may not be able to get to do that anymore. It may be a logical consequence on that in that respect. Another aspect of logical consequences would be realistic. Realistic consequences must be realistic to a child for them to do and for a teacher to be able to follow through on. For example, if a student writes on their desk, we have students that want to do and things like that. If they write on their desk, a realistic consequence would be for them to clean it. They would have to clean it. Not you go clean it, not you go get someone, they clean it. But then the teacher would have to follow through to make sure that they've done that, to make sure that they've cleaned it and that they've cleaned it correctly, properly. That would be a realistic consequence for a student. Another aspect would be a respectful consequence. Respectful consequences are communicated with respect for the child. This is where I live in my classroom. This is really big for me in my classroom. The teacher is firm, but caring and focuses on the specific behavior rather than making general judgments about the child's character. In my room, I have my expectations, I have my rules and things like that, and we go over that from the very, very beginning. And I'm consistent with it from the very beginning because, as Mrs. Hargo pointed out, consistency is the key. And a lot of what I do, I want things done a certain way. And so we have to, from day one, I have to set, okay, here are my, the way that I want things to be done. And it takes a moment, it takes a while for them to get it because they have their way and then there's my way, and our way is not going to be the same, okay? And it gets frustrating, but you have to stick with it. And so, but at the same time, in them learning you and you learning them, they are people like we're people. They are humans like we're humans. They have feelings too, even though yes, they're children, but they're people. And so that respectful piece, it matters. It matters to them, and sometimes it can help them to want to do the right thing, if that makes sense. It can help them to want to do what is right, not because they're going to get in trouble for what they don't, but because it's the right thing to do. One of the examples of this would be if a student pushes on another student, right? That's not something that we allow. So you would immediately say stop. You know, we would teach them in our school, we teach them you treat others the way you want to be treated. Okay? That's a real big thing in class. Is if you don't want something done to you, then you don't do that to them. You treat them the way you want to be treated. So that would be a respectful piece. That would be teaching them, okay, you have feelings and others have feelings. That's that respect piece. What you would not do is you would not make a general judgment on that student and say, stop being a bully. You know, that would be attacking that student's character. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that, as Mrs. Hargo pointed out, that they feel valued, that they feel loved, that they're in a safe place, And that it's okay to make these mistakes. However, we have to think through these things with our choices that we make. Sorry. And using these techniques, the next slide. When you are, as a teacher, using these techniques, one of the main things is, the first one here is to remain calm and not emotional. Yeah. Again, I said children are humans, just like we are. They have their attitudes, they have their personalities, and they will push buttons. In case you haven't noticed already. They like to push buttons, and it can become a game if you don't get it from the very beginning. You react, they react. You react, they react. And they think it's fun, right? They find it amusing. So it is important to remain calm and not emotional. Now, it's not necessarily where, you know, you have to push the student to where they get upset and then they're the only ones upset and you're fine. No, we have our responsibility too as teachers. But if you remain calm and not emotional, you think things through and you're teaching them how to think things through. I have my students who like to cry. I don't allow crying in my class. And so we have conversations with each other. Okay, so instead of crying, because that's not helpful, how can we handle this? What are some strategies that you can think in your mind to think this through? How can you calm yourself down? So just as I'm being calm and not emotional and trying to work through myself, I want them to understand you can do this too. Okay, you can remain calm, you can be at peace, and we can get through our day together, right? The next thing, be consistent. I spoke about that already. It's very, very important. Sometimes some of the ways that I like, I'm a little OCD in some of the things that I want to do in my class. You know, probably none of you are like that. That's okay. It's just me. But because I have that about myself, and because I know that about myself, patience is huge for me, and it has to be for them too. They have to understand that they have to be patient with each other, and I have to be patient with them. But being consistent, like I said before, we'll get there with that consistency just by a matter of being patient. Avoid arguing with the student. Very important. And it's not necessarily about, this is where you kind of have to check your ego at the door, because it's not about, well, I'm the adult and they're the child. Right. It goes back to the